Hello and welcome to our pre-brief for the Learning Walk at Decorah High School on December 10th. The purpose of this Learning Walk is to really observe students and teachers in the classroom for just short periods of time. We're going to have a specific focus, something we're really looking for, a focus area, and certain look-fors that we're going to encourage you to pay attention to as you're going through there. The focus area for this Learning Walk is student engagement, specifically emotional, behavioral, and cognitive engagement. We will have a document for you the day of the walk, and Liz will attach it to an email so you can see sort of some more specifics about those and what exactly we would like you to look for as you're going through the classrooms. We'll be spending about 7 minutes in each classroom, starting with John Condon at 9:25. His Exploring Construction class is made up of mostly underclassmen, so 9th and 10th graders, and they are about halfway through their construction of a wooden basket, which is really their first big project in the class. So at this point, students are working on a number of different steps in their construction of the basket, and really Mr. Condon is turned into kind of a multitasker, problem solver, guide, and helper, and hopefully we'll get to observe that when we're in there. Then we'll go across the hall to visit Brad Johansson's physical science class. In here, they're a freshman. They're working with the moon right now, so likely we're going to get to observe them thinking about and dealing with phases of the moon or how the moon affects the tides. A little warning here, the lights might be out as they're reasoning through the how and why of the phases of the moon, or how and why the phases of the moon work the way that they do. But there's also a chance that they'll be working with tides at this point in the class period instead. We'll see what's there when we get there. Then we'll head upstairs for the beginning of third hour, and we'll see the very beginning of Carrie Kaufman's psychology class. This class is mostly upperclassmen, 11th and 12th graders, and they will be starting a research project where they will work either alone or in pairs to research a specific psychological disorder. So Carrie will just be starting, she'll be explaining the project, talking through what's required, and starting to assign the topics. After she explains the project, the students then will have a couple of minutes with their partner to select their top topic choices, and then she'll draw names to see who gets to pick their topic first. There are a variety of different disorders students will be choosing from, and they will not be repeated. So if another group chooses one that they want, they're going to have to go on to a second or third choice. The fourth room you visit will be mine here. This is an Algebra 1 class co-taught with myself and Michelle Nestaby. Students in here are 9th through 12th graders that have historically struggled with math, and they are going to be reviewing for a test that we happen to have on Wednesday. So we've been studying solving equations and solving inequalities, and so they are going to be self-assessing themselves on the learning targets and then completing a review circuit linked to those standards, and then they'll use their self-assessment and their performance on sort of that diagnostic circuit to decide what additional skills to practice for the remainder of the class time and as they review for their test Wednesday. There are 2 teachers and an associate in this classroom with about 15 students. After that, we'll end our walk by visiting Dana Hogan's English 9 class. Those students are reading Romeo and Juliet currently. They've been engaged in the text, but sometimes their interpretations are creative, so Dana says to be ready for anything as we walk in there. As we can complete and participate in this learning walk on Monday, a few norms to keep in mind just to help things run smoothly and to make sure that we aren't too much of an inconvenience for our hosts. 1, to maintain a positive attitude and respect for the lab host. Then we also want to avoid being a distraction in the classroom. So no talking to students or other teachers while we're in the classroom observing. Especially with the teachers, we really want to save those conversations so that everybody can hear and participate in that during our debrief. We will try to maintain silence. Do not take it upon yourself to teach the students. We want to just be observers in the classroom. Stay close to the action. Feel free to get up close to them. Even though that may seem like it can be a little bit distracting, we want to make sure we really can hear and see what the students are doing as learners, and they know that we're going to be in there. So we don't want to talk to them, but you do stay close enough that you can really see and hear what is happening and what they're doing as learners. And then the last part is especially important for me. I need to record detailed notes because my memory is not very great. So please make sure you record some detailed notes that are aligned with the observation, because we will use those during the debriefing session. And with that debriefing session being the next afternoon, it does just make it a little bit easier that you may forget some of what you've observed or wanted to mention if you don't write it down. So during the debrief, we'll talk about just listing off observations, things you saw. Then we'll have a chance to ask questions, and then think about some next steps or some actions that you might want to put in place. So make sure that you have good notes. We will provide a document to help you, a place for you to take those notes. We'll also be providing some clipboards to try to make that as easy as possible. Okay, thank you. I look forward to learning from you and with you, and so does Liz. We're excited about this opportunity to work together on this learning walk, and we thank you for being a part of it as well. Thank you.
Hey, can I have your eyeballs? Hey, I need you to look. So, if you're looking, is anybody like spot on in agreement? Like your charts? Hey, we do have a little bit of disagreement in the fact that if your peripheral was greater than 180, you tend to have longer than 12 hours. And if you're less than 180, you have less than 12 hours. So I'm going to just give a couple to check. So if you check your full moon, so look at your full moon. Your full moon should be 6 p.m. rise, approximately, close to 6, midnight overhead, and about a 6 a.m. set. Okay? If you're within an hour of that, you're good. If you're 3 hours off that, something didn't go well.
Is that this one? 3 a.m., 9 a.m.,
Okay, let's do another quick check then. Let's go with the last quarter. So the 90 degrees, the last quarter sitting right here. I can see the left half of the moon is illuminated. So if you did the clock and your peripheral was at 180, you would see this rise occur at about midnight for the last quarter. It will be overhead, straight in front of your earth face at 6 a.m. And it would set at noon. I mean, if you're off an hour or so, it's reasonable. Just depends on your peripheral. If you get off 3 hours, there's probably something else going on.
No.
Got it.
Look right here.
Hi, camera. You do it. Okay, see my weird flex picture I sent you.
That would be PM.
What do you mean?
You have the midnight.
More of like the dog.
Then you have an AM on the set.
The best friend.
You should have the following. You have this sheet, correct? Which then reinforces what was on the chart. You have the times worksheet, which is due when? Wednesday. And right away you're going to see a pattern, the same pattern that you just found, which was how many hours between rise and set? 12 hours. Which all of a sudden you can look at the tide chart, and you're going to see that, oh my gosh, there's 12 hours between high tides and 12 hours between low tides. Hey, when's this due? Wednesday.
Yeah, pass it up to the person off and grab it. Alright, today you guys are starting a project. Last big project of psychology class. We're almost done. 6 class periods, 200 breaks, and then 4 after that, 10 total. But you're starting a project today where you're going to be researching a different disorder. I've got the potential disorders up here for you that you can look into. So start kind of looking at that last list, seeing if anything that jumps off the screen to you is a thing of interest. You will not be doubling up. There will only be one of these topics per hour. You can work by yourself or with a partner. I think the assignment sheet says you and a partner. You can go by yourself. I don't really care. You've got enough disorders to go around. So this one is pretty well, it's a 40-point project overall, and there's a lot of different components to it. So it's not just like, let me tell you about this crazy weird thing that I learned about. It's a little bit more in depth. You have to talk about the definition, right? So when we come, and you guys did a little bit of that when we talked about the 6 different types of disorders last week. But you have to define, right? So if you were looking at autism spectrum disorder, you have to define it. Symptoms, like what are the characteristics of it? So it's that definition, and then the next piece, like what does it look like? That's sort of the difference there. Prevalence. So this one is an important piece to understanding how common some of these things are. Some of them are incredibly rare. Some of them are way more common than you'd expect. But you want to look across age, sex, ethnic groups, right? Like see where it's most common. Risk factors. So if there's anything that can be done that increases the risk of some of these disorders, some of them it's you'd be like, there's nothing you can do about it. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. A few of them, there are some environmental risks that can contribute to those disorders. Causes, right? So those will pair closely together. You got that definition there for you, like what causes different. There's a lot of different factors, right? There's not just very rarely is there like one simple answer, but it might be genetic, it might be chemical imbalance. Again, others could be environmental, right? So you have to talk about those. And I want you to circle right now, if you see that line where it says like, include as many contributing causes you can find. Remember the 6 perspectives, put a circle near that. And it goes all the way back to the start of the year. Right? Yeah, so it's in the causes bullet. Yeah, include those 6 perspectives. Remember, that's how like different psychologists understand psychology, right? Is it biologically based? Is it environmental? Is it a combination of whatever? Remember your 6 perspectives. We go into the assessments, and that's the diagnosis part. So when somebody is going to be diagnosed with a disorder, how do psychologists go about doing that? Because again, we saw that How Mad Are You video we watched last week. It's not as simple as pointing to somebody and saying like, oh, you've got this thing. It's like check mark, done. Right? The psychologists were wrong a couple of times. But it's in like getting an actual diagnosis is sort of like a longer process. Again, it could be so like observation, brain imaging, written tests, some of those things when they're diagnosing somebody. And then treatments. So what can be done once you've got that? Once you've got the diagnosis, how do they deal with it? Right? Is it medication? Is it therapy? We talked briefly about like CBT or that cognitive behavioral therapy. So some of those, like, and again, I know a few of these. Right? They will, like CBT is a really common therapeutic practice. It might be something you find. And then prevention. Is there anything else you can do to prevent? And then in the back, there's like Works Cited. And this part is key too. So you can use, you have to have at least 3 different sources. 2 can be online, I guess besides your textbook too. But 2 can be online. 1 must be from an actual physical book or a journal. I have a few checked out. This is a college level psych textbook that is wonderful. It's a great resource. And it doesn't count as your book. You can use your book. I have a couple books on bulimia disorder, depression, anxiety disorders, and then I have this beautiful thing. This is like gospel for high schoolers. So you write in your book like the DSM, right? And that's, again, it's the diagnostic manual for psychologists, right? It's what they use when they're going to treat somebody. It talks about symptoms and all of those different pieces. This is the DSM-5 made easy, so it makes it a lot more approachable and understandable for people that are not clinical psychologists because it is intense. But when it goes through, right, it has, this isn't the best page, but it talks about features, and it has like case studies that go with them too that might help you understand some of the symptoms a little bit better. This thing would be an excellent resource. I think it has pretty much everything that's on this list up there, except maybe conversion disorder. Yeah, so that needs to be at least 8 minutes long, no more than 15, because these can get really long if you want them to. You can definitely have a video. Sometimes there's some really good videos out there that go with some of these. It can't be more than 3 minutes of your presentation. And then I think that's the big overview. Any questions at this point? Okay, so you can work with somebody or by yourself. I'm going to give you a couple minutes here. Look at this list and take a couple minutes. Pick like your top 3 choices. I'm going to draw names for who's going to get what. Whoever gets drawn first gets to pick first. So have a couple just in case your first one gets taken. So talk to whoever you want to work with or to yourself. Yeah. If you want to narrow it too. Sit down.
Five 3 P's and I take 5. Nope. 5 3 P's and I take away 3 P's. What am I left with? So we'll let keep papers. I have 3 papers. Take away my 3 papers. What do I have? Remember, if you have a question on one where you asked us or you were unsure what to do, circle that problem number on your half sheet so you have a record of what you want to focus your reviewing on.
All right, how about you, Tibble? How do you feel?
Like I don't want to hear create big scene to get him out.
Yeah. What do you think Tibble wants to happen?
A fight.
A fight. Well, does Lord Capulet want to fight at his party? No. What did the prince say? If ever you disturb our streets again, what's going to happen?
Then die, kill him.
Yeah, then someone's life is going to be paid. And maybe this isn't necessarily that we're going to have to pay the price because it's not the city streets. But still, if I go to Lord Capulet's and there's a big old fight that takes place, do I want to go back?
No.
No. All right, but notice we have Lord Capulet, all of these are Lord Capulet's lines. Notice how he's having this conversation between lots of people. And he's got that happy voice, and then when he turns to you, it's not as happy. How do you feel about him by the time you get to the end of this?
I feel like I was kind of like really annoyed and like disappointed with him. Like I was shaming him because he was being too disobedient.
Oh, disobedient, yes. He called you saucy. And not in a way that the connotation would be awesome for us, right? That he's really frustrated. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Have a seat. I need one of the Romeos and I need one of the Juliets. Come on, over.
You got it.
It's Ryan.
She told me she wanted to.
No.
Ryan, come on up. While Ryan's coming up, why did you come to the party, Romeo?
Because he wanted to meet girls.
He wanted to see everybody, but really, who was the one girl that he's coming to see? Juliet doesn't exist in his world yet. It's that other girl, Rosalind. And she is the most beautiful woman that the sun has ever shined on. And so Romeo's coming, and he's just going to stand against the wall and see her, right? Because she's so beautiful. She's a swan, and what are all the other women? Crows. And Juliet, what does she think about marriage? It's an honor I think not of. And then we have Romeo seeing Juliet. Light imagery, people, did we see any light imagery the first time that Romeo sees Juliet? Okay. Everybody just turn back to 201. So Romeo, the moment that you see our Juliet, those are your lines in pink there. So, what do you think?
I guess he thinks that she's really pretty, I guess.
She's really pretty. And all of a sudden, she teaches torches to burn. Look right underneath the highlighted part there, or if you want to look at line 46. So shows a snowy dove tripping with crows. So now Ryan is a dove, and all other women in the room are crows. And who's in the room? Rosalind. So Rosalind went from being this swan, rounded, to a crow the instant that he sees her. What does that tell us about Romeo? Romeo, what's that tell us about you? Morgan, you have to represent now because you're not up here. What's it tell us about you?
I don't know.
Yeah, Ryan must be so amazing. But think about that rashness, that change that took place. Now let's look at those lines the first time that we speak. And we can come back to this picture because our palms are going to be important there. But if we go to the first lines that Romeo and Juliet are speaking there, and Shakespeare thought this must be so important that he doesn't just have us have it in blank verse. He's going to put it into sonnet form. So with our partners, let's look at the rhyme scheme that exists, and Romeo and Juliet sitting partners can do it, and then Romeo and Juliet standing partners can do it. Just grab a pen from my desk. But here's the first time that they meet, the first words that they say, and we go from never seeing each other, thinking that marriage is an honor, I think that of, to what happens between Romeo and Juliet by the time we get to the end of this? They kiss. Well, end of the play, yeah. But how about the end of our lines? They're kissing. So we go from never seeing each other, in love with somebody else, marriage something we don't want, to kissing in our 14 lines. All right, go ahead and do your rhyme scheme on the side, please. Yeah, you can write it right up there.
Let me see. Okay, so that'd be because we're kind of this one rhymes with this one. And that word.
Right, and then now it's each other.
To the
You are right, but that's not necessarily the intent or the sonnet form. So sometimes it would happen that these lines could run in our pieces out, but you're right, it should be even though you're in
it's like to hear.
So since
you can put it to the D, but we're going to talk about that because it's separate. Okay, so several groups.
Do we have everyone here that we're expecting? No, Fred. 1, 2, 3. We'll just, since he was just a host, we'll start without him, and if he comes, then we'll just save him kind of maybe for the end, since others won't be waiting for it then. Okay, so welcome everyone to our debrief of our first DHS Learning Walk. A few things as we get started, we're going to try to really keep tight to an hour. So if there are things we feel we're not going to be able to accomplish in the hour, we may end up prioritizing and getting some of the feedback from you later or some of the next plans later. We'll see how things go, but sort of in part of that as we go through the rounds, we're going to try to not do a whole lot of like elaborating, you know, when we're saying what we observed, just kind of those of you that were observers, you know, just kind of, we'll do quick sort of whip arounds of this is what I observed, and we'll go around until people have sort of exhausted their list, and then we'll move on. I think for some of the hosts, we've decided it maybe is easier if we talk about sort of one of the places we observed first, sort of round one, round two, and then ask our questions and then move on to the next one. And again, we'll try to watch time on that, and that way that host teacher can leave if they need to. I know some have other commitments. A few things to keep in mind as we do this. Our norms are sort of like the original ones, just we're not trying to be judgmental, either positive or negatively. That's something I always find hard in these, is I want to make judgment calls. Like, I loved the way you did this, and we want to try to refrain from that as much as possible when we're mentioning what we observed, and just get out there what we observed to move forward. And one key thing is that we want to avoid using any student names. So I know sometimes it's, especially if we see the same student in multiple classes, which happen with some of these, it might be easy to mention, oh, in this class, blah, 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 in this class, that same student, but don't use student names, because then they have to be edited out of the video. So we want to avoid that. If you look at your document, it looks through, it says sort of the rounds on the back of that note-taking tool. So we'll do sort of a round one, just observations. I saw and I heard. Things dealing with the engagement, emotional, behavioral, cognitive. And then we'll try to get to sort of round two if there are certain things that you noticed, sort of the impact of those on student learning. And then we'll have a chance to ask questions, and we'll wait for any of the round four next steps until we've gone through all of the classrooms that we visited. Okay, so let's see. Who all were participants in the activity where you have observations you'll be sharing? It may just be easier to go around if everybody knows. So raise your hand if you have observations you'll be sharing. Okay, and others were hosts, so we'll skip over them as we sort of go around with our whip around. So let's go to our notes. Or for me, it's helpful to have notes because my memory is awful. We are going to actually start with Dana Hogan's classroom because she has to leave for a meeting here shortly. So we will start with maybe Tom, and we'll just kind of circle around. Observations, it's this first round, so just things that you saw or heard in Dana's classroom.
I saw excellent role play that engaged all the students.
I saw smiling and reacting as they listened to that and other things.
Skip me for this one, I was.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I guess I saw the similar things, but students that maybe would have been reluctant or not wanting to go up there at first, then kind of got drawn in, or you just made them go up, which then I think it was good for them to be up in those positions that maybe were a little uncomfortable at first, but we're still able to help and contribute to the classroom.
I saw the teacher help students expand on their ideas so that they had confidence in what they are saying, and she supported them with helping to expand their idea of what they were trying to say.
And I should have said at any point when it gets to you, you can say pass if there's something else you want to share. I saw student books open on the desks.
I heard students discussing how they would respond if they were the role play up front, even though they weren't, so they were still looking at each other and wondering, is this what you would have said? And I guess that, you didn't have to say it in front of the whole class, but you still felt like you had something to say.
I saw students quickly checking with each other about things across the table, just wanting to be making sure they're on the page and where we're going.
I guess I heard students trying to craft the right words as they were trying to take their ideas and explain that as they tried to fill the role of a character from the book. So it showed that they were processing while they were up in the front of the room what they needed to say and how to convey that to their audience.
I saw students transition from full group to pair work.
I heard lots of vocal variety from the teacher.
I saw lots of connections between the text that was a visual aid on the TV to the students, back to the teacher, and vice versa many times.
I saw lots of free sort of unsolicited sharing about their thoughts about Romeo or whatever as we prompted them to discussion amongst each other quickly went to, oh, I wondered, I think, and something like that was a sign of engagement there.
I saw a teacher that was very prepared and was able to seamlessly transition from one thing to the next with having the focus be at the front of the room, and then pretty soon everybody had this piece of text which was distributed quickly, and then soon students were focusing in small groups or individually at their desks.
I saw a lot of positive reinforcement around the classroom with different memes. Maybe they weren't memes, but different small posters offering encouragement.
I heard that students were given roles, not only characters, but and she mentioned the light imagery people, so certain perspectives or things that they were supposed to focus on as groups of students.
I saw students that I see in other areas of the school responding positively to a bit of a fine arts setting.
Similarly, I saw people comfortable up front who might not expect, there was a felt safe to be up there doing what you asked.
I'll pass.
I saw students who were almost maybe excited and a little nervous and maybe even giddy about the topic, because I think that for high school students, maybe the concept of this forbidden love story makes them kind of giggly and things, but it was also something that I think they all unified in, and the story was becoming something they could relate to, not just something foreign in a text that they had to read. So they were relating to what they were reading and putting it into terminology that they as teenagers could understand.
I will pass.
I will pass as well.
I'll pass again.
And so we're going to try to keep each classroom to about 10 minutes, I think, in order to get where we need to go. So we're about halfway in. So the round 2 is impact on student learning. So if there's anything that really jumped out that you noticed and impacted any of those things that you saw or heard, we'll share those quickly. We'll start going this direction this time. I'm sorry, what was this? Well, it's, so, note like what impact it had. So I can start. I noticed that giving the students roles had the impact that they were geared in more in it because they were going to be asked to paraphrase and to give that character's perspective more so than just reading the role or acting as that character. I'll pass.
I guess I would say that it seemed like engagement was high among students, and I think it was partly just to the way that the environment that the teacher created. I think somebody mentioned a lot of vocal variety, and just being somebody very easy to listen to, kept the engagement high on a topic that maybe could be done in a drier way by some teachers.
impact on learning may be yet to be determined. I mean, it's not clear just watching, but lots of possibilities. Yeah, I think learning is, they're well engaged.
I noticed that they were able to cover many different topics by being assigned those different roles, whether it was a specific character role, or a thematic role, or a set and lighting role. They were all covered, so I noticed at any point in time, they had to be ready to cover versus just, let's talk about roles. Then let's all talk about this. They were multitasking.
I noticed with the amount of variety and activities that students did not really have the chance to get bored with one area and tune out because they were moving to something different, whether it was look at the text, come up here and act it out, now let's look at the rhyme scheme on this handout that I'm giving you. That there were lots of transitions, which I think helped students all stay involved. I'll pass.
Pass.
I would pass.
I will pass as well.
I will add one quick thing in, just from a language arts perspective. The word variety comes up a lot, and one of the things that I think would impact the learning a lot is watching the students act out, but at the same time having the text right there and having it just big and then larger than life on the screen and highlighted. And I think that would perhaps allow the kids, if they had to read it on their own, they're going to be able to make a better connection of what's happening, because there were so many other things that were being paired with having that text right there. And then also showing the picture of the two of them with their palms together, which is part of the sonnet that they were then going to look at. But just being able, just offering them a multitude of ways of engaging in the text instead of just, here, read this scene and good luck, you know, so.
Now I think we'll take time for questions, and instead of going around and asking all the questions and then she responds to all of them, I think to make this more efficient with the number of people we have to get through, just if anybody had questions about how or why she did something or made decisions, I think we can just ask those and have a conversation with Dana now. Anybody have any questions for Dana?
How did you assign those roles, and did it depend on sex at all, like that a character could be female and the person had a role play, it could be a male?
No, I never care about gender because in so many ways it's not a part of it. Our central question deals with relationships, and we have relationships with all genders, with all age groups, and we apply it in a lot of different ways. And we start before we even begin with several different activities, and we throw gender away there. And so as we're going through this, then it's easy to say, all right, between you two, you are Romeo. And one of you is going to be the actor, and one is going to be kind of the director. And so it's really easy. I may have two girls who get the Romeo card, and that's fine. We're not going to worry about that. It takes a little of that giddiness away. Sometimes it's easier if I do have two boys at this, then they're less apprehensive than if it was a boy and a girl, and oh wait, maybe they do have a crush on each other, and we have lots of things. So when it's random and each day you have a different character, then it doesn't seem to, gender doesn't have to get in the way, I guess.
I wondered if this is very similar to how you taught this in the past, or if the extended class periods have changed the way you do it.
The extended class periods allow us to get deeper into each scene, but I am behind as far as, usually it's never a problem to get through Romeo and Juliet between Thanksgiving and Christmas unless you have a whole lot of weather. Well, we had one late start and I am feeling behind, but the kids really enjoy, acting and the relaxing. They were a little apprehensive about it, having an audience, and so there was more stiffness up front. But I think that once they get relaxed, they can have fun, with this, especially Act 1 and Act 2, because there's a lot of comedy with the heaviness underneath. Once we get to Act 3, people start dying, so it's not as fun in that aspect.
what do you do if you get a young person who is up there and supposed to be role-playing and it's a moment where you want more from them, but you just get that stiff reaction and they just don't really give you much? How do you combat that?
Well, they all have partners, and so then the partner can help them. And, it can be, well, what would be another way you could say this? And before we even started, we had like a sentence, and, we talked about, well, if we stress this word, what meaning did it have, or if we stress this word? And so then, well, what could be a word that he could stress? And then, if we go back to tone activities before, so there are things to build upon, but it's obviously easier for some people up front than others. But if you can find something little that you stress this word, why did you stress the word? Even if it wasn't amazing acting, if you can draw attention to something that was done, the same idea can come across.
Great. Well, thank you. If you need to go.
Thank you. I've got 3
It's
minutes.
your time to go. I know.
Dan, see you Thursday.
And then, let's see, I think Carrie needs to leave as well, so we'll jump there next. And I'm just in the classroom, so I won't participate in the sharing this time. We'll try to do those same rounds quickly, and hopefully we'll get the hang of things here. Things will go well. So, anybody want to start with the I saw, I heard round one? Psychology. I felt the same way about algebra. What are we doing for a test? This is not just a study project. Yeah.
I saw upperclassmen who were tired.
I saw kids found it easy to share with each other when prompted to do something. This is for conversation.
I saw some excitement in students' faces and heard it in their voices when they finally got a chance to start talking about which disorder topic they were going to research. There were some that were seemingly sort of passionate about some of those that were listed up on the board.
I saw students who were respectful of the class and of the teacher, and that had, I would say, good skills within the classroom. Some of them took some notes, some of them turned to the correct page. When they were supposed to hand things in, they handed things in. Maybe some of them, I don't know how many, but they were respectful of the class and the teacher. I think they felt that there was a purpose for being there. They knew what that purpose was, and they were committed to that purpose.
I heard an ability to just get their attention immediately, even though I already said they seemed kind of unengaged and just kind of tired from Monday morning. They instantly were attentive to what was happening and were ready to move on with what was asked. Even, it was, by the way, here's your project, and there wasn't I don't know about this, it was okay, we're ready to go.
I think I saw people sitting with their friends, which could be good or bad, but it was good. So that's hard as well.
I saw students from different grade levels, which is very different for me because I always teach students in the same grade level, all sophomores. So I'm just kind of curious to know how that dynamic changes when you have students that are maybe at different developmental ages or have had more experiences in other classes or in life to add to the learning.
I saw students take advantage of the options that were given, whether they wanted to work independently or in a small group or with a partner, and on what the topic they wanted to do. They seemed to take advantage of the choices given.
I saw and heard a teacher who had clear expectations, but yet there was some freedom. And here are different sites to research from, but you're also going to research with books. but you can pick this different disorder, or you can do this. So there was a clear expectation, but yet I'm good to kind of make my own decisions as well.
Pass.
Pass.
That's
So,
One thing
Now-
I would quick add, sorry, is I noticed that students, as they listened to the teacher's subject notes, some highlighted the handout. I feel like they all felt comfortable in just handling the information in the way that made the most sense to them. Sorry.
no, that's fine. So anything that you noticed that you think had an impact on student learning or engagement, in particular, those connections, now you can talk about in this round. I'll start with you.
I noticed that by you giving them some freedom in their choice, students seemed more engaged in what they were choosing and committed to maybe what they were choosing because they were given those choices rather than you just assigning them a topic and just saying, this is what you get, this is what you need to do. By offering them some choice, I think there was some buy-in from the student perspective.
I think along those same lines, you also had defined which ones needed to be covered. So it wasn't completely open-ended for them to pick anything that was of interest. They still had to stay within the confines of, these are the ones that are needed to know for the course. So I like the way that the teacher set it up so that they could pick their top 3, but then it would be a random draw to see who would get to pick. So there was still this balance of I have control, but you have some control too, which I think, like you said, brings in a little more buy-in, but still covers all the material that needs to be done in the course.
Just like from the brief stuff, that's what I noticed. The hard part of that choice is what people can't get what they want. Like, are people gonna throw a fit or be upset and so the well laid out process for that made it possible to offer that.
I noticed clear classroom management that has been established. Even though they were quiet as they entered, there was still the demeanor of, I enter this classroom, I sit down and I get ready, and I think we even had a moment where we don't know if we really heard the bell, but it was time to go. They knew it was time to go, and there was no, we're gonna milk this as long as we can. It was just, we know we're a group, and that this is a classroom where this is what is expected of me, and I'm ready to go.
Pass.
All right, so now.
The one thing I would, piggyback off what somebody said about sitting with friends, I think when you do have mixed grades like that, I think that it goes to the safety too, that someone had mentioned, that it feels like that, that was in danger, but I agree with that happening in your room as well, Carrie, that if I'm in there and I get paired with a freshman and I have to do a disorder that I have no interest in, I mean, my buy-in is gonna be nothing, but if I'm right next to the person that I would normally hang out with, I might feel safer to even choose a disorder that I know something about because maybe someone in my family has that. Or if I am another student who would rather work by myself, how nice that I have that option as well. So I feel like all of those things made it, the engagement, I think, even that much stronger, so.
Okay, question time. Does anybody have any questions for Carrie that they would like to ask?
With the longer block, choices for the time used, research and whatnot, is that different?
Yeah, so like over the past years, I kind of, in a little bit of this time, I really wanted to get it done before winter break. And then in the past, I've done it over, the unit has taken 2 or 3 weeks. And this time I did unit stuff before, and now this project is going within this week, so they'll start presenting in the second half of class on Thursday. So time-wise, I think the amount devoted to researching is different. It's a little bit more concentrated, which we'll see if that works or not. I'm a little nervous that they're you guys probably have it, with the hour, you know, and a half of research, like, they can get burned out. From what I've seen, they're still going strong. We'll see tomorrow kind of where they're at, and like, if they need, how much time they need on Thursday.
So a lot of dedicated class time for that moving forward.
Yeah.
We'll need more outside of that probably.
It depends how much they're in class. Like some, like, there are some folks that work super hard and like they'll be able to get it done. And like the one I like to do, give them time, because like I have those text resources that I don't want them to take home, because if I don't be bringing them. So a lot of people like in class, they took pictures of the book pages that they need, and so they have those for reference, which is nice. So some have been doing some outside work, some were in flex time today doing work. There's a decent amount, there's enough classroom devoted to it. We'll see if I should spread it out next year.
You gave a overview as you were speaking in class, but then what did the handout that you gave them include as far as expectations?
So the handout was a lot more detailed, like kind of specific, but when I say like, the one that was like throwing people off was prevalence, because I want them to know, like, understand like how common these disorders are. There was I don't know, there was like a psych professor, I read it somewhere, but somebody was saying like they wish that we didn't call it abnormal psych, but they wish we called it just regular, normal psych, because they're like, it's so common, like 25 to 30% of like the population experiences like some sort of like just like behavior that could be diagnosed like as a disorder in a year like lifetime. So it's like I want them to understand like how common some of these things are, or how uncommon some of those things are. Because there are sometimes when you say like, oh, this guy's just so bipolar. It's like legit, no, it's not how it is. And to kind of understand like where we see the disorders too, because some of the phenomena are pretty interesting. Like eating disorders tend to happen only in like Western cultures. Like they're not super common elsewhere. And it's interesting. So that might be changing, but like that's traditionally how it's been. And you're seeing more men and women like across the sexes like being diagnosed with anxiety and eating disorders and other issues. So I was wanting to see where this is at. Like that's the one. So the handout is a lot more detailed in that regard. I'm going to get some of the specifics of like time, if there's like a video, like all of these, and like with the work studies. I'm going to give them like the rubric on the second page so they can see like which categories are weighted a lot more. It's like they have the works cited is like, it's like 3 points that they have to have these matters, but I want like the idea of like causes and like that to relate the causes back to like some of the basics of psych that we've been working through the whole semester. Like that category is weighted a lot heavier because like that's where I want their focus to be. So things like that stuff.
Any other questions? If you are free to go to rehearsal if you need to. Do you want to stay and give feedback on other classrooms? We can do that too. We'll
I can leave my sheet if
John
you want
was
to
like,
try to
oh, read your stuff off. Yeah, that'd be great. I'll try to
show my
do that. That's where it was. Okay, so we will move to John Condon and exploring construction. Somebody wants to start us off with round one, what you saw and heard.
I saw Santa's workshop. Everyone was busy and well engaged.
Yep.
Start there.
I would piggyback on, I saw work ethic.
I saw a lot of nonverbal communication when the big dust machine was on. Then it was interesting to see transition to more verbal communication once that was on.
I saw students helping each other.
Yeah, I saw a variety of things happening, different projects, like some kid was building a box, and then other kids were working on the baskets, so it wasn't like everybody was doing a carbon copy of the same thing. Then you had some kids that were working like individually on their baskets, and then there were others that were like in groups of 3, and they were, helping another student with operating a machine or cutting wood, and so there's a lot of variety going on.
I did not see any milling about wondering what I should do next.
I saw a teacher who was kind of a team player with them and kind of gave them the guidance when they needed, and if necessary, probably said, this is how you should do it, you're a little bit off here, that's not gonna work, but gave them the chance to explore it first and wasn't just constantly the dictator.
I noticed that the girls were separate, kind of in their own area and in a group together. And Carrie noticed that there was lots of focus and teamwork.
I noticed what I would call sharing of resources, like they had to share the use of the different machines when they were available and the use of different tools that were available.
I saw some techniques that made work go by faster. For example, drilling holes in some of the wood didn't have to be like pre-measured because there was like a template already by the drill. So they just stuck the wood in to this pre-made template, so it drilled it precisely the same for every one. Or measuring the gaps between the boards and the basket, there was already a template board that created the correct space, which I imagine there must have been some kind of pre-teaching or modeling of that beforehand, but it also made the work go by faster, but probably also more like consistent, because it took a lot of that measuring and human error out of the process.
I also did not see people lining up, waiting to ask a question. There was just enough independence, so guidance was over the shoulder, perhaps approached. I also saw the girls too, but I thought seniors, but maybe there were other seniors, I don't know.
Some of them are freshmen.
One's a junior and one's a freshman.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a senior, a junior, and a freshman.
I was thinking the three that saw, but I mean.
Yeah,
think
one
that's
of them
right.
is a freshman.
Is it? Okay.
I, similar to not always having to ask these questions, but I saw and heard support for each other, no matter who it came from.
I saw some autonomy and that the teacher checked in with everyone, so there was kind of that sense of both belonging and trust instilled with those. Carrie saw that the teacher took time to scaffold with a student who needed some assistance and then let him post over.
I saw what I would consider probably safety protocols that were in place. Students were not, well, they were wearing their protective, goggles and things, but there was no horseplay or any of those kind of things that could create some kind of disaster or chaotic experience. It was not chaotic. Students were, very cautious of each other and of what they were doing.
Yes.
Okay.
Carrie noticed students taking a lot of time and care with each piece.
I noticed the layout of the shop, which I kind of mentioned earlier today too, but how it facilitates the ability of students to move around and be able to get where they need to go. Things didn't seem like they were all in just a jumbled mess and nobody knew where anything was. There seemed to be centers and areas where certain things were happening and other areas where different things were happening.
Yes.
Test.
I think the one quick thing I would add that I don't see is when the teacher did give instructions, the students listened very carefully. And just clear that they had something they wanted to know and they were gonna get that from the teachers and they could move on and act upon that. And the other thing that I have, which I think is similar to what maybe other people said, was just the students moving deliberately, and that idea that they're not just mindlessly, or they were just wandering around, but they just seemed to know what they needed to do. And that they were working very carefully and meticulously, that they didn't want to rush, they wanted to make sure they were doing it in a way that was quality driven.
And I think some of sort of the round two stuff comes up in our round one stuff too. It's hard for me to draw the distinction between them maybe. But if there's anything in particular about things that you noticed, to be the impact on student learning?
I think in all this, first observations, we're seeing impact on learning and not just skills around working with them, of course, but efficiencies and working with others in a tight, complicated space. So that's an impact, that's a type of learning. It's not so common in other rooms. Obviously, they learn it if they're executing it that well.
I would say that I noticed from, like you said, some of the other observations too, that there has to be I think there's a tolerance for students to be at different points in projects. And there's a tolerance for students who are good at certain things and not good at other things that maybe sometimes are not as apparent in other classrooms because everyone's expected to be at the same point at the same time. Sometimes in other classrooms where like there wasn't any rushing or things like that because they don't have to. Because they're worried about creating a quality product that they're proud of in their own time done by themselves. And I think that's an important aspect that seems to be reinforced in the room.
Carrie noticed that an enjoyment for what they were doing was fostered, and I think some of that comes from that same, like, the trust and the feeling of belonging that they had in there, and that they were feeling like they were, achieving a task that they found value in.
Very similar, I would use a different word, and I noticed a respect for each other, a respect for the teacher, a respect for the project, a respect for the machines. It didn't seem like they let any of that slide. It was all there, and when all those pieces were come together, the end result is usually stronger.
Anything else anyone wants to share there? Okay. Questions, so we'll just kind of add, if you've got any questions for John, we can ask those and he can respond.
So my big question then would be, how do you get 100% buy-in of all of your students to follow and respect the safety protocols and those kind of things? And or what happens when you have a student who doesn't seem to take seriously some of those things?
They talk to Mr. Waska. I'm very serious. It's like, no tolerance. If somebody is defying a safe environment, it's instant Mr. Waska. And so, that is, let's see, that class there, DC Hood was in that class, right? And so he's no longer.
Much student names, but yes.
So no, to be seriously, there's just no tolerance for any defiance of my authority to tell you what to do once you're in that classroom or that shop. And it's, yeah, so I guess that's, in all honesty, that's the deal. So.
I was curious about the dynamic with the girls being in their own group. Is it common in your classes that the girls choose to just work together, or are they typically more spread in with the others?
Yeah, so that always is a question I have when I have girls in my class, and this time around I have 3 sections of exploring construction, which is the class you saw, and I have at least 2 girls in each of the classes, which is a lot for me. So 3 girls in that first hour class. And so I have to ask myself, do I treat them just like any other student, or do I pair them, group them up? And I've had good luck grouping them up. They seem to enjoy it more. That's one of the things that's taught to us as industrial tech teachers, that if you want to get more girls to take your classes, encourage them to do it in pairs, so they have a friend in the class. I usually bust up friends in classes. That doesn't work very well for me. It's mostly males, and they get there next to their friends, they goof around too much. So I usually break up friends, but so that was a deliberate grouping. And it's working okay in this instance. They're a little slow. They're a little bit slow, but if I can just talk about speed, you mentioned something about people at different points in the project, and that's kind of the great difficulty of teaching a class like that, is you get people ending at different times, and you don't have the dead end that you have in a unit with the quiz, and then the new thing. So one of the tricky parts, you guys came in and saw kind of the easy part, like everybody working on their project, and they were within 3 to 4 days of each other. That's where they're at. And there's hundreds of steps to that project, as you can tell. Like, oh God, one person's doing this, one person's doing, there's just 10 different things going on at the same time in that classroom, right? So the difficulty is when you get students that are done, which I will have within about 3 days, students completely done. So then they're usually good workers, and I'll have them come back for just a couple days and help others kind of move forward, But I can't do that for very long, or that's not right for their growth as a woodworker or student, So the end of a semester is tough. Once they get done with their projects, cabinet making class, they took their projects home, and that group there will go wild if I don't have something for them to do that's valuable. So as a teacher, that is my big concern, that the pacing with students who are done and students who are slow students who are slow just keep working, right? And they get help from other students who are done, and they just kind of push forward. So that, in the next week, I have to start addressing those students who are done. And one student in that class, since you mentioned that kid that was building that box, he just appeared in our district 3 weeks ago, and he had taken some classes in Pocahontas, and he's in the class now, but he doesn't have any of the training, and he came in at the end of this basket project. So he and I just got him out to the shop about a week ago. He was doing some other book work before, and we're, okay, you and me are going to build these boxes, which are for the middle school. So that's what he was doing, and that's why he was working on that project right there. So he'll build the next project, but he won't build this current project. So, classroom management.
One follow-up question on that related to the speed part. I can imagine, because you can't be everywhere at once, because you're going to grade the basket for its qualities and meeting certain marks and some sort of rubric, probably, right?
Yep.
I can imagine, as they go, so nice and independent thing of that, certain kids are just going to race ahead without you over their shoulder saying, wait, or what
Right.
about this is not meeting. Do you ever have to make them undo, or is that a general problem? I can see it as being a problem, stuff I do like that.
Yeah, and so what I do is, if you get to this point, you have to show it to me and I have to approve it. So it's that kind of prior training. Once you get these 4 parts screwed on, I have to approve it. And then then you can go to the next step, and then I have to approve that. So there's about 3 of those, and that works. That's what we do. And we had already built the basket as a group. So you guys came into this process, and so we had built one basket as a group as training, because they don't like written instructions evidently. It's been my experience. And so we built one, but then I have to reinforce it with small demos, which the hour-and-a-half class period is so nice, because I can take, hey guys, come on over here, let's talk again about how we do this part, and take 10 minutes and do it, and then they can work on it that same class period. It's not the next day. It's awesome. It's just awesome. And you mentioned something about efficiency, and that's really where I'm at. It's really not so much about woodworking, it's about working efficiently, and also I tell them explicitly, talk to the person next to you. Don't come to me right away. Talk to the student across the table. Help each other. And here's how to be a good helper. And I have lessons on how to be a good helper, So if they exhibit that, I'm pumped about that.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of the conversation.
Did anybody think the shop was messy? Dirty?
didn't occur to me, I've been in there through a lot. I just noticed the industry.
Yeah.
Because every time I walk in, I judge it.
Oh.
I walk in, I go, it's not bad. This will work.
I'll do that, yes. So, I usually fail like everybody.
Are you saying that while you're looking at my desk over there?
No, but some shop teachers are very clean
Oh, yeah.
and like uber organized, and I'm not. I refuse.
I felt like the students had a really good sense of where they needed to be and what they were doing. They didn't, none of them felt lost or anything
Right.
like that. So that wasn't a thing. I was going to quick ask, I felt a sense of almost meditative attitude.
Flow, man.
And does that happen a lot?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and when it's good, it happens a lot. But that's, remember when I mentioned flow in that meeting and she said that's 10 years ago? It's that kind of flow, it's like focus on your work, do good work. We have music on a lot of times, yeah, time goes faster.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
We will head to algebra. Michelle and I are both here.
I just saw what appeared to be extreme focus when I entered the room. It was silent, they had their task in front of them, they were working.
I saw them just easily asking for help, receiving it. There was no, came from the students first, and they were eager to get it in.
I saw the use of technology like the smart board or the smart board, and even individual students using calculators. So we saw the use of technology.
I heard teachers who were asking questions and prompting them to think instead of just saying, that's wrong, change this.
Ditto, that's my pass right now.
I saw the students using a teaching strategy called the review circuit, which I did not know what that was, but it seemed to create a little bit more engagement among students, other than maybe some other types of review. And it was pretty much individualized. Students were working through it mostly on their own. And thinking about which of these am I struggling with, which ones do I get, as they decide what they needed to study more.
I'll pass.
I saw a fairly strong adult-to-student ratio.
Yeah, that said, I saw a certain earnestness and diligence in their work that didn't involve, heavy-handed teacher present. I think they were floating. And when we weren't there, they were working away, so that's well established.
Pass.
I saw what looked to be somewhat like flexible seating in the sense that students were not just in rows facing forward, one person to a desk, that students were in small groups or pairs or kind of sitting near the back and the front. I don't know if they choose that or not, but they seemed comfortable where they were at.
I saw patience from the teachers. And not, connecting to what I said earlier, not always just wanting to jump in and just have them get it right, but give them patience to go through this circuit and self-guide themselves and give them the right steps forward, but hopefully let them hit the finish line themselves.
Probably related to independence, saw a connection made to the larger purpose, which was establishing what needed to be understood better for the test composition, by how the circuit revealed that.
Pass.
Pass.
I saw less frustration than expected.
piggybacking off of that, definite purposeful, definitely engaged in what they were doing, and that was their task, and there was no going about trying to, divert their attention to something else. Even to the point where I noticed a little bit, not much, but a little bit of students helping each other, kind of looking over and, but then also, I noticed an enormous amount of acceptance of teacher help. Instead of these students feeling like they were embarrassed, especially with the observers and a camera in the room, or students feeling like, I can do this. There wasn't any of that. It was this real open, almost an appreciation for, and it almost seemed like a handoff. It was just really smooth, almost, it felt choreographed, like just slip in, a little bit of work there, slide to the next person, a little bit of work there. Yeah, and with that, also a good placement of the students, allowing for free movement of the instructors, and I never felt a bottleneck where all of a sudden all three instructors were on one side of the room and I don't know if that's something that you guys work on. I guess that would be a question for the next section, but just always a sense of, divide and conquer, but in a positive way conquer.
We practice our
There we go.
after school, 3:15.
Block your moves out.
Is it
It's
bad
also
if we ask
take
a
on the
reflective
floor.
question?
Yeah, there we go, let's take on the floor.
I don't care.
Okay, so I will jump ahead to a reflective question, and since it kind of piggybacks, because I noticed, saw and heard everything that Liz just said as well. And I kind of said something to Michelle about this yesterday after the lesson, and just wonder from your perspective, do you feel those same things we saw and heard most days, or did you feel a different presence in your students because they felt like they were being watched, so they were on their best?
And it's okay.
Yeah.
So I said to Tom, I said, it's a really, really good class, but I almost felt like they were kicked up a notch in being good. So then when all of you guys left, we had just a little bit of behaviors from one of the group, like I can finally release some.
Walking around with clipboards, we'll have some.
Yes.
I don't care.
We should have had some lab coats on today.
And what I noticed, they are, I think, they're seeking out help when they need it. They're willing to think through things. I actually was, they're talking to each other less than usual.
Yeah.
Like I want, because that's the one thing that, and we try to foster too. There's a reason they're often sitting in pairs or groups. If they're a little unsure, I want them to be willing to check in with each other as well. And I felt that the day you were here, maybe because you were here, they were less likely to do that. Or the ones that were talking, they were talking so quietly. There's usually like this gentle hum in the classroom, and that was missing. But
Sure.
that's the difference that I noticed.
Because I just wondered with that, and I made the comment earlier, the adult to student ratio, I think was great. They were all getting the support they needed when they felt like they needed it and everything. At the same point in time, I was questioning, do they ever feel like they're constantly being watched and there's always someone hovering and it just puts me on edge? And I just wondered if you guys ever feel that, or if we saw a different setting that day.
We had a couple people absent who do feel that way.
Okay.
But,
Sure. Yeah.
And there are times, like, I don't know if you noticed, but I stood up front and rather than wandering, because I don't want them to feel like someone's always over their shoulder, but very purposefully, like, and intently watching to see, okay, who's looking confused, who's looking like they might have a question, and then I'll go there. Just because if you've got 3 people wandering and passing, that can be a lot.
Yeah. And saying that, I noticed what seemed to be a very strong teamwork between you 3 as well. there was a clear understanding of, I'm kind of always over here, because these are the couple that need my help or my support, and I know what to give them, and we do this, or, et cetera, and it just seemed to flow very well.
So I guess if anybody has any sort of notice for impact on student learning, we can go there, or we can go with questions, I guess.
I have a question, whenever we're.
Yeah, that's
Okay. Now, how have you guys, in a classroom like that where it is very content-based, the math portion of it, what happens in that extended period, like later on? Is there like a fatigue for some of those students for just the focus and the paying attention for an extended amount of time, or how do you deal with that extended class period?
I haven't noticed fatigue from them, and part of it is, that was, the day you saw was an outlier. They're often more in groups and discussing, and there's more back and forth between, okay, I'm gonna talk about some stuff up here, and now you're gonna spend a chunk of time working in your groups with us checking in on pages. But even that day, and I felt like this could get really long, because they're just reviewing for a test, so they did the circuit, they found what they needed to review, and then they were, it was just a more worksheet heavy day, because they were practicing for this test. And they worked through it, they worked for the time and didn't to lose that focus.
And as far as math classes go, I really see those 2 morning blocks as being good. But then when you hit that third block, it's like, I have had 2 long classes, and then when you get to that 5th period with math, I just noticed the shutdown. And I don't have that because we're the hour before that, but.
Gotcha.
I'm guessing there's things that need group activity that can alternate between individual and overheated. What's an example of what you might be doing as needs that whole group to do something?
Typically there's sort of the gradual release model, so we'll talk sort of as the whole class, just laying out our learning goals, some of the major definitions, and there's more of that in the team taught class that's sort of together, because it's really important that they don't sort of get off track on their thinking, because it's hard to pull them maybe back in. And so often,
Seeing that good model.
yes, just sort of modeling how to think about a problem, or, what we're working on are solving and graphing inequalities was a recent thing. So we would talk through as a class, well, what happens when we solve this inequality, and they'd be doing steps, we'd be doing that on this, I'd be doing it on the smartboard on sort of a copy of the paper they have, while they can record it in their books. And then, okay, we've done this one, we've talked through it, now in your groups, talk through the next 3, work through those, checking in with each other, and then kind of, okay, once you're getting more confident because you've done more with your group, now let's do some individual practice to see who's getting it on their own and who's not. Any other questions or comments? Okay. You're welcome to stay, or if you want to leave. This will be quick, we can ask questions anyway, so switching to physical science. We'll do kind of that, what we saw and heard. Brad will be able to see this later if he wants, and then for questions, I'll maybe just collect questions that we have at the end, and then email, and then share those out with everybody. So in physical science, what did you see and hear?
I saw a teacher who had complete control of the classroom, even though there was a lot of hustle and bustle in the dark and lots of kids. It was made very clear when it was time to listen, time to respond, time to work, and had the extreme ability to just have that in a second's notice.
I saw students engaged in an activity rather than just sitting and listening to the teacher up front give them information. I saw them actively seeking information based on the experiment or activity that they were doing.
I saw a teacher trying to get students to make sure they're sticking to this big idea, and perfection can be let go of in terms of that. More to say, but I saw that.
I saw groups of varying size, some groups of 5, some groups of 2, and students that were sort of going out as emissaries from a group to go see what another group had done and then come back and report to their group. Carrie saw some individual troubleshooting as teachers went around the classroom.
I saw the teacher had an awareness of the time, the clock, and recognized there were only like 3 minutes left in the period, so quickly just kind of got them all to be quiet and seated so that there was some closure of what's the assignment, what do you have to do, because then leave just in a frenzy in the middle of something.
I saw different partner and group dynamics for the most part. Very strong teamwork, cooperation was happening. Noticed one group that was more off task than others, and noticed their, I guess, a little bit of ninth grade immaturities coming out.
I saw a teacher checking for understanding in this sort of discovery type of activity. Important for the reasons we talked about. Students can get off track as they develop their own ideas about something. So we check in on, what about this spot? What do you see here? Here's how it can be slightly off. We just making sure they're in the right realm of where they want to grow into this understanding before they get too far off track necessarily.
Students wanted to know if they were right or not,
Yeah.
they cared about that.
That's all us students trying to ensure that they were on the right track. Yeah.
Connecting to what I said and along those same things, I noticed that, except for that one small group that I mentioned before, and it was a little, and I saw a teacher who would kind of naturally be over there a little bit more just to give that presence of making sure, here's where we're at, and then when there was that call and response at the end, there was a lot of like eye contact that way.
Yeah.
Trying to make sure they were kind of looking in tune to see, are you there? I'm hearing from everyone else that they're there. Where are you guys at?
I saw reminders on the board about the things that were coming up and or the things that were happening that day. There was a quick rundown of what was going to be done that day to maybe help guide, as well as like announcements that were coming up, just another visual reminder of what students needed to be doing.
I saw lots of thinking, questioning, and checking between groups. And follow-up of, I think students had done the activity, and then sort of that visual reminder. Remember, you were here, this is what was happening. So going back to that checkpoint question, when students had questions on things for the teacher. And our time is up, it goes quickly. So what I would ask is if you have any questions you would like to ask Brad, just email those to me and I will pass them on, and then I will share his responses as well as the questions with everybody that was here. And then the last piece we didn't get to, which is very important, is the next steps. So hopefully, after doing this learning walk, the goal is, okay, going forward, are there things that you want to try? Are there things that you notice that you're going to pay more attention to in your classroom? And so we will be contacting you to do that. We'll probably send out an email or a Google form or something just to get that information from you. But the goal is now, this is more of the formal, okay, we need to list off this stuff, but our hope is in part that it helps build the relationships and fosters that. So now moving forward, being able to follow up more individually and talk to those that you've observed or that you've talked with here, and build ideas sort of as a community for how we can all build engagement. But I think we saw some great things.
We appreciate very much your involvement and if we choose to do this again in the spring, which is kind of what we're leaning toward, get your sense of the flow and the time and other things like that. And so I'd like to give all of you a high five, just like I saw in Brad's classroom. So thank you very much for helping us make this work. It was certainly valuable for us, and hopefully it was for you guys as well.
Yeah, so thank you for your participation and your time. Thanks. Okay.